fans, we are almost near the dog days of summer as we come to close the end of July, which means it is officially trade season. Well, the Metropolitans, they already have made one deal, but Mets fans, they want to know if more deals are coming, and they want to see what David Stearns is going to do. So that's what we're going to talk about on this episode. Deals, and hopefully more deals. We don't got time to waste. Let's get started.
John Heyman, Joel Sherman, we're here to talk trade deadline, but we want you to look at the trade deadline first. The New York Post Sports Plus page, we have a very extensive list of all the players who could be traded over the next 2 weeks. We have their strengths, we have their weaknesses, we have their best fits. John wrote the template for it. I only had to edit off of it. John, what do you think of our list?
Well, I know it's long. I know I spent a lot of time in Atlanta, Georgia doing it, and I hope it's worthwhile. We got close to 100 guys on there, and people just love the trade deadline. Everybody's into it. I mean, even the Adam Frazier trade got a lot of play. So, I mean, I think this is something people are going to be interested in.
Yeah, and I think we'll be shaping it as we go along also, as we hear more names or guys get traded. So please keep an eye out.
All right, Mets fans, we've got deadline action in Flushing. The Mets, they made their first major move, swinging a deal with the Orioles to land lefty reliever Gregory Soto, and this one's got some serious October potential. Now look, Soto's been a bit of a roller coaster this year, big stuff, occasionally shaky control, but he's also got closing experience. He's a two-time All-Star, and when he's right, he's got nasty written all over his slider and upper 90s heat. The Mets bullpen, they've been holding on by bubble gum and prayer, so adding a high-leverage lefty like Soto to the mix with Edwin Diaz feels like a step in the right direction. Plus, the Mets don't have to touch Drew Gilbert, Christian Scott, or Luis Angel Acuna to get it done. It's a solid start to the deadline, but if the Mets really want to make noise in the NL East, this can't be the final verse. More on that later. Gregory Soto, he's in the building. Now let's see what David Stearns has in store for Act 2. When it comes to MLB Trade Deadline insight, there are few voices sharper than Joel Sherman, the New York Post Baseball Columnist and MLB Network insider. He's been tracking every rumor, every target, and every move that the Mets could make ahead of July 31st. So this week on Dugout Discussions, Joel joins me to break down the Gregory Soto trade, what other holes David Stearns needs to fill, and why this deadline isn't just about 2025, but also about shaping the Mets' future as well. Joel Sherman, the great columnist, joins me now. Joel, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Dexter. Forgive me. I'm having a terrible hair day, trying to do nothing but make phone calls here and text messages. So forgive the Brooklyn Dodger hat. Brooklyn in the house here, right?
There you go. Brooklyn's in the house. Two Brooklyn guys here. So I'm never going to be mad about a Brooklyn Dodgers hat. But Joel, you're a very busy man at this time of year. So we're going to get this started. And let's start with the move that the Mets made that's already official. They added Gregory Soto to their bullpen. What's your initial reaction to the trade, and how do you see Soto fitting into this relief corps right away?
So I think when you're an experienced general manager and you have a top flight team and you have multiple things you've got to get done, one of the most important things you could do is kind of get on the board. There's going to be so many late decisions here on teams like Arizona, Minnesota, Texas, St. Louis, etc., who are debating, Tampa Bay, debating buy, sell, do both, do neither. That if you wait till the end, you could play some musical chairs on multiple things and you might not be able to sit in all of them, or you'll be rushed. The Mets knew definitively that they needed a lefty relief pitcher. Was somebody better clearly going to shake loose than Soto? You know, so you could look at Soto and believe that he can, part of what the Mets are thinking is the NL East probably goes through the defending NL East champion, the Phillies. You got to have people who can deal with Harper and Schwarber, right? If you've been watching the Yankees play against the Phillies these last few days, if you don't have guys who could deal with them, you have big trouble. And, 2 weeks ago, the Mets didn't have Raley or Soto, and now they have both. And if the National League probably goes through Ohtani and Freeman, the Dodgers, you better have guys who could deal with it. The team that did the best against the Dodgers in the postseason last year were the Padres, and they got Tanner Scott, who was kind of a slayer of Ohtani. Ohtani went 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts against Scott in the postseason last year. That's how the Padres almost pulled off the upset, one of the key reasons. So the Mets got a power lefty. Is Soto perfect? No. There's a lot of walks in there. He could really lose the plate, but it's a high-octane fastball, a swing-and-miss slider, and he is a horror show on lefty hitters. And again, The Mets began the season with Danny Young and AJ Minter and thought they had two high-end stuff guys to do it, especially Minter, who also had great fortitude for a big moment. And then they went through a long period of a lot of Jose Castillo and Richard or Dickey Lovelady or, that group of guys. And this is better. And it takes them off the board for lefty reliever now, and they can concentrate on the other stuff they need as we get towards Thursday at 6 p.m.
Yeah, that's what they can do now. They can move their attention to other stuff. And that brings me to my next question, because you recently wrote that the Mets deadline plan can't only be about relievers. So what other roster area pieces do you believe they must absolutely address in these coming days before we get to Thursday?
Well, I actually think the next most important thing they could do is pull down another reliever. And if that were perfect, Dexter, it would be a guy who could pitch in the last 3, 6, 9 innings of the game, and also somebody they can imagine being the closer in 2026. Look, I assume the Mets will find a way to keep Edwin Diaz, but he can opt out at the end of the season. And it might be of the view of David Stearns, who Steve Cohen is letting do his thing, the best anyone's ever getting out of Edwin Diaz, we already did. Let's not add to this contract. Let's get out. So that's why the Mets are going to be associated with Ryan Helsley from the Cardinals, who I think is almost certainly going to get traded. He's a walk-year guy. But then the really talented non-walk-year guys, does Cleveland trade Emmanuel Clase or Cade Smith? Do the Twins trade Griffin Jacks or Joan Duran? I think those questions are being asked through the sport. Every person I talk to does not have full clarity on that. It changes the marketplace if those 4 arms, or even if one from each team gets traded. And clearly the Mets have reached out. And I do think it is not in David Stearns' normal behavior, Dexter, to want to trade big prospects at this time of year. He does not feel, I think, that it changes playoff odds that much. But to me, the Mets have not won a championship since 1986.
Yep.
They have only made the playoffs in back-to-back years 2 other times in their history. They've gone 10 years without finishing in first place in the NL East. There is some value as you try to establish a new culture and criteria for what's going to happen under Cohen Stearns with the Mets and in this regime, to be a little bolder. And if a guy like Duran or Jacks or Cade Smith gets traded in the next few days, the Mets need to be front and center there to try to do it. I do think that's the most important thing. Can they pull down a center fielder? That would be great. Do you think Cedric Mullins is a big improvement? He's not having a very good year. He does hit left-handed. If all things were perfect, it would be a lefty hitting center fielder that the Mets went and got. His defensive metrics aren't good, but if you talk to people from the Orioles, they actually think he's a good center fielder. And I don't think it's just spin, because I've talked to people who've also been there in their past who think he's better than the metrics. And look, the last thing they could really use is a very hard thing to find in any market, including over the next 3 or 4 days. The Mets believe in the 4 guys they could start in the postseason. Their fan base might not think Frankie Montas is a playoff starter, but the Mets think Frankie Montas has high-end stuff and is a playoff starter. They feel that way about Senga, they feel that way about Peterson, and they feel that way about Minaya, and they still have Clay Holmes in reserve to potentially go in the bullpen, where he has pitched great in the postseason for the Yankees. But there's real fragility there, right? Senga's missed a lot of time each of the last 2 seasons. Minaya missed a lot of time this year. Frankie Montas should buy a condo on IL Island. He's on it so much. So like if the Mets knew they could get to October 1st with those 4 guys, I think they'd be relatively comfortable. They can't know that for sure. And so I think they're not looking for a depth starter. They're not looking for like Zach Eflin or Zach Littell kind of guy who, Paul Blackburn pitched a rehab start today real well. I assume he's coming back. He becomes the 6th starter, long reliever right now. Tyler McGill is someplace down the line. They still have Sproat and McLean, who are youngsters. They're not just looking to fill innings. They would look for someone who could start a postseason game.
Right.
And can they find that in this market? To me, that's about if Minnesota trades Joe Ryan or not, or if you can believe that Sandy Alcantara, in the midst of a horrible year where he literally has the worst ERA of any qualified starter, that he's an easy fix or 2 away from looking like 2022 Cy Young Sandy Alcantara for the rest of the year, and then you have him for 2 more years after that. It's beyond that, it's hard to see the difference making, definitely start a playoff game for the Mets starting pitcher out there.
Yeah, there's not a lot out there. We'll get to that in a second. I want to go back to the bullpen because you brought that up. If the Mets were to target another arm for the bullpen, which you and I both agree they need, beside the names that you just brought up that you think they could realistically pursue before July 31st, who of those do you think is most gettable?
Well, Helsley's most gettable because he's a free agent. I think the Cardinals are prioritizing their 3 free agent relief pitchers. If you were asking me who's 3 players I expect to get traded over the next, 3-4 days, I think that Ryan Helsley, Steven Matz, and Phil Maton, who by the way is having a terrific year, and if he reunited with the Mets or ended up on the Yankees, I wouldn't be surprised. I think all 3 of those guys get traded, and maybe the Cardinals even trade more than that. Jojo Reyes and John King, who are controllable guys. But I think there are 3 walk-year guys, like Maton, Matz, and Helsley get traded. And they're all good in their own way. So, the best relief pitcher who I think gets traded for sure is Helsley. But if I could get my hands on Joan Duran or Griffin Jacks of the Twins, I think that's the best outcome for the Mets because they don't take a step back from Helsley and they have 2 years of control beyond this year.
Yeah, that's very attractive for them. Let's switch to the lineup here, Joel, because you talked about center field a bit. Is that the best position, center field being that is that the best position for the Mets to upgrade if they want to add another bat, or would you prioritize or think about a different position, maybe third base, move on from some of the young guys? Which way would you go if you're the Mets, center field or another position to upgrade the lineup?
So I wouldn't be surprised if over the next few days, the Mets used from the stockpile of, if you want to include Acuna also with Mauricio and Vientos and Beatty, I wouldn't be surprised if at least one of those guys moves in the next few days, which would then perhaps convince the Mets that they need to get another infielder, another bat. Do the Mets truly believe that Jeff McNeil can handle center field from here till October, whatever, as part of a platoon with Tyron Taylor? Feels flimsy to me because as good as Taylor is on defense, the offense is non-existent, and that's asking a lot of Jeff McNeil, who's not a center fielder and been through a lot of injuries. And nevertheless, if you told me that, for example, they ended up with Brandon Lau of Tampa Bay, good lefty hitter with power, and he was their second baseman because they were committing to McNeil in the outfield, that wouldn't surprise me either. I think that the Mets are very flexible here. They have a lot of flexible young players that do that, and McNeil is a chess piece. The question is, do you believe the McNeil chess piece can actually hold down center field for an extended period? That feels like a big gamble to me. The Dodgers have shown vulnerability this year. I think once they took their payroll to $400 million after winning the championship last year, it felt like the Dodgers were going to, get like a NCAA tournament invitation to the World Series this year. I don't think that's true. I think that they could be beaten in a series, especially if Mookie Betts doesn't perk up, and especially if their pitching continues to be whack-a-mole who's healthy this week. I think the Mets need to go for it. And I don't know if you can go for it with that center field group.
I happen to agree. So, with that being said, Joel, you mentioned Cedric Mullins, right? You mentioned Duran with the Red Sox. Who are a few of the realistic center field options that you think the Mets could target that would bring impact to the team, I should say, without gutting the farm system? Because that's the thing here that you hear from the fans, right? Like to see them go and upgrade center field, but if this is going to gut the farm system, they don't want to do it. Now, Duran sounds like he'll probably take at least a couple of high-level prospects. That would be my assumption there. But is he a realistic option? Is Mullins? Is there somebody else that you think?
I think the price on Duran is incredibly high. He's a homegrown guy from the Red Sox who is an important leader in their clubhouse, who has performed well. Not this year as much, but certainly last year. If he gets traded, I still think the Padres are a team that's been desperately trying to get him for an extended period of time. I get it. I always tell fans the same thing that I'm going to tell you, Dexter. When you want to make a trade, there's two things. When you want to make a trade, don't pretend you're the general manager of the Mets. Pretend you're the general manager of the other team. Of course, as the Mets, you want to give up, nothing. You'd like to trade Paul Blackburn for Jarren Duran. I get it. That's not act like you're the Red Sox. What would you need to give up a player with that much control and that much talent who's already performed in the major leagues? And it always reminds me of a lesson I learned from Billy Beane when Billy was the pre-Moneyball general manager of the A's. I was still a young reporter. I don't even know if I was still the Yankee beat writer or if I had graduated to a columnist yet. But I called up Billy and I said, "What would you think of this kind of trade between Oakland and the Yankees?" And he started laughing at me and he goes, "Joel, this trade you're suggesting is very painful for me. To make it fair, it has to be no less than equal amount of pain for the Yankees, and you're not causing them enough pain in the trade." So like when I always say to like Met fans or Yankee fans, like imagine you're the other GM and there's got to be an equal amount of pain. And if you're going to get a difference maker like Duran or Jacks out of the bullpen or Joe Ryan for the rotation or Duran for the outfield, that's going to be extreme pain. And then remember, most prospects don't work out. Like I was just having this conversation, Dexter. I don't know if this is interesting to you. It's
Yeah,
like
sure.
the Yankees are very protective of their farm system under Brian Cashman while making lots and lots of trades. And there's been a lot of people who they wouldn't trade over the years. But literally, if they had protected no one over the last 25 years but Aaron Judge, they would not have been killed in the trade market. Like even if they traded Luis Severino, like it was good for a while. I mean, really good. He almost won 2 Cy Youngs, but it didn't last very long. If they traded Gary Sanchez, it was good for a while, but it didn't last very long. If they traded Gleyber Torres, it was good for a while. It didn't last very long. Major League Baseball's hard, and I know that like now that like Spencer Jones has hit a bunch of homers, it's like, oh, you can't trade Spencer Jones, and I'm like,
Yeah,
the
you
best
can.
outcome for Spencer Jones might be Adam Dunn with fielding ability, which is really good, by
Right.
the way.
Right.
That's really good, but like, do you trade that for Joe Ryan?
Right.
Sure.
Right.
Like,
You don't know if the person's you don't know, prospects don't pan out. You don't know if there's going to be a generational talent. And Mets fans watching this show, they know they've seen a lot of prospects who haven't panned out. You've seen it over the years,
yes.
Joel. A lot of
Most
prospects
don't
are highly
pan
talented.
out
Yeah.
because there's only 750-ish guys who play Major League Baseball at a time, and of those, there's maybe like 75, 100 real difference makers. You could probably drop that to maybe 50 even. So the likelihood that you're trading a real difference maker is what? And by the way, you could trade real difference makers and survive. The Dodgers traded both O'Neal Cruz and Yordan Alvarez for essentially nothing historically, like for things that didn't even really help them. Oh, who won the World Series last year? The
The
Dodgers.
Dodgers.
I mean,
They were fine.
you can survive trading like really good prospects.
So let me ask this, Joel, because you said the price for Duran would be high. Do you think it's more realistic that the Mets get a center field option like a Mullins, who you talked about
Yes.
before? That seems like more of the vibe of the kind of player that they could get to play in center field, correct?
Or do they think that Ramon Laureano, whenever I talk to scouts, they think Ramon Laureano, who used to be a really good center fielder, is now much more of a corner guy. Do the Mets think like Laureano is better than like the thing is he hits right-handed. So what does that do for Tyron Taylor, who's a favorite of this general manager, of David Stearns? You had him in Milwaukee, and Taylor certainly brings defense and tangible stuff to the Mets every day, but the offense is bad. Do you believe Laureano could still hold down center field? 3-4 years ago, I would have said yes. I'm not sure that's true anymore. So I think that just if you were saying to me, who do I think they end up with if they get a center fielder, and I don't think that that's a sure thing, but I think if they get a center fielder, it's more likely to be a walk-year guy like Mullen, who doesn't really raid their system. They give up some depth pieces, but not the top of the system.
Yeah.
Especially because Mullins is a big name, but not having a big year, and it's his walk year. You're getting him for 60 games.
Yeah, that would make sense to me.
And the Orioles aren't going to re-sign him, so you might as well. And
know.
I don't think they're going to qualify him. So
Right.
they have to get what they could get out of it in a trade right now for him.
Yeah, it seems like.
And they want arms, and the Mets system is deep in arms.
And they've got some arms they can give up with some depth that aren't top-level prospects. They could do that. Now, this also is the thing, because what's your read on Drew Gilbert and his ascent in the minors? Look, we're talking prospects again. I know he's been hitting well recently. Do you think there's a chance he could be that internal center field answer for the Mets, or the Mets are looking at him down the road?
I know what happens is guys start to post numbers in the minor leagues, and it's backup quarterback syndrome among fans, right? Like
Yeah.
it's the guy you're not watching is always better than the guy you're watching. I will dare say that Carlos Carrasco has been consistently starting in AAA this year and has like a 3 ERA. I mean, we watched him early in the season for the Yankees. I mean, where he had the most marginal of marginal stuff. Alan Winans doesn't look like a major leaguer in any way when he pitched for the Yankees, and he was dominating at AAA. So I just like, if those guys are the best and they're dominating, like, what's the next level that like Drew Gilbert and Spencer Jones are hitting against regularly? That would make me wonder. So it's really about, like, internally, are the Mets looking at Drew Gilbert scouting wise and liking what they see, and metric wise, like, is he hitting the ball hard? Is he barreling it up regularly? Although that kind of stuff, is really, really important. And do you want to put that kind of player into a pennant race?
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, fans are going to want it. You know this, Joel. They're going to want.
I get it. The
yeah.
fans always. The next player is always going to be great. I know. Spring training of 2023. I heard from Yankee fans, the Yankees aren't really trying if Volpe isn't on the opening day roster. And then over the last month, all I've seen is pitchforks and torches for Volpe.
Yeah.
Like they get to change their mind easily without losing their job or costing anybody money. But the reality is most guys don't make it. Last year, everyone was screaming for Brandon Sproat to come up, right? And he took a real long gestation period at AAA end of last year, first half this year. He seems to have it going now.
Yep.
So, like, he's one of those guys. He might have needed failure to get good, and maybe it is time to bring him up. But Major League, the jump from the minors, from AAA to the major leagues, is not crossing the street in a small town. Yep. It is like trying to run across the LIE at rush hour.
Ooh, yep.
It's tough. And so,
Yeah.
I think it's tough to just say, hey, let's throw Drew Gilbert into a pennant race. Maybe it will work. I mean, remember, Michael Conforto coming up, being a really special player for the Mets.
Yep.
But Michael Conforto's now stuck around for 10 years. He's a really good man. He's having a bad year this year, but he's a really good major league player. So, like, who knows?
Yeah, you never know. Now, you've also written about the possibility of adding a starting pitcher, right? Now, based on the market right now, do you think the Mets will add a starter? And if so, well, you kind of mentioned this about what kind of arm makes sense for them, and I happen to agree with you. It's somebody who can start a playoff game and possibly be at the top end of that rotation. Alcantara is a name you mentioned there. Zach Gallen's another one.
So the guy with the worst ERA in the major leagues among qualified starters is Sandy Alcantara. Number 2 is Zach Gallen.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit like what I said about Cedric Mullins, which is you got to be careful that you're requiring the player and not the name. The name of those guys, Alcantara, Mullen, Gallen, they've been historically good players. They have not been good players in 2025. And last I noticed, they were going to decide a World Series for 2025, right? Like, so you've got to be comfortable and confident. Like, hey, like I had somebody the other day tell me, a personnel guy for an American League team. He said to me, I absolutely have advised my team to go get Alcantara. And I said, why? And he said, easy fix. We could fix it in a couple of bullpen sessions. Now that sounds crazy to me, right? That sounds crazy because I think the Marlins are better run right now. I think their baseball people are good. If you've noticed, they're getting better and better. And the idea that they haven't been able to fix Alcantara and you think you're going to snap your fingers and fix him 2/3 of the way through the season, maybe it's a really talented guy. His last start was really good against San Diego, but that was a day game in Miami. Was everyone on the Padres on South Beach the night before? I don't know.
Right.
So, yeah,
would you go for Alcantara if you're the Mets?
So the question is always for that, like, what's my cost? And
right.
the Mets under David Stearns have begun to build a real pitching factory. Like, they're doing so much better. I think everyone has great regards for Jeremy Hefner, their pitching coach in the major leagues, but like up and down their system, they're getting more well regarded. You talk to other teams, they're like, the Mets have prospects and they have pitching prospects, and that they're teaching them well for what the industry likes, which is important. Do the Mets watch video of Sandy Alcantara and say, he is really close? He's really close. I talked to a scout the other day who was at the Yankee game, and Jonathan Loizaga got beat up. And the guy said to me, he goes, you can't write it right now, but you know what you should write? And I go, what? He goes, Jonathan Loizac is going to be good the rest of the year. And I said, what? He said, he was so close to being really good tonight. He said, he's coming back from his own Tommy John surgery. He's been rusty. But if you asked me, did he have really good stuff tonight getting beat up or not? I would say he had really good stuff. And he's going to pitch well now for the rest of the year. And I was like, okay, let's see. You know what I mean? So it's like, can the Mets look at video of Sandy Alcantara or their eyeball scouts who have probably been on him and truly believe this? Because the Mets aren't just playing to get in. The Mets are good enough to win.
Right.
The Mets are good enough to win. Like, they got close last year and no one thought much about them for most of the year. This year, they came in with expectations. They had a lull. They seemed to have rebounded well from that lull. And now they're kind of flying a little bit again. And the Dodgers are more vulnerable. The Mets are at least as good as the Phillies, if not better, to be able to win the division. The Brewers are a team the Mets beat in the playoffs last year. Like, the Mets could actually win the division, win the National League, win the chip. They could do everything, Dexter.
Which is part of the reason why you were talking about how
I
David
would go
Stearns has to go for it, right? So
I would go for it. Like, I get it. David Stearns was brought in here to make the Mets a machine in the way that the Yankees and Dodgers have been machines for the last whatever. You know, the Yankees have been a really good team since 1993. I mean, undeterred. Since 1993, they made the playoffs in all but about 5 years. They've never had a losing record. The Dodgers are at about 12 or 13 years of just being great. And that's David Stearns' job, is to create a consistent high-end contender. You know, because the feeling is always, hey, if I make the playoffs 8 out of 10 years, someplace in those 8 years, I'll win a championship, right? Give me enough swings and I'll do it. And I think the Mets want to believe that. And I think the Mets can, but I think that their farm system has grown enough that you could chew a little from it and go get a really difference-making bullpen guy, which is what I think they need. They need one more guy out there where you are saying to yourself, we are down 3-2 after 7 innings, and Yoan Duran and Edwin Diaz are sitting out in the bullpen. So we literally have no shot to win this game. You want to shorten the game. I watch, and look, I know people will say Diaz is a tightrope. I mean, Diaz is one of the best relief pitchers in the world, right? If you have a lead, he's generally going to close it down, and his stuff is great. And Duran's stuff might even be better with his splinker, and Griffin Jacks stuff might be better because he's got such high octane stuff. And a Kate Smith, Emmanuel Clase, I just feel like if they added one more of those, nothing makes you bulletproof. Right? Devin Williams came into a game last year. Devin Williams was great. Is great.
Until he wasn't.
Came into a game, left the changeup up. Pete Alonso hits a home run. The Mets advance. So, like, stuff happens in the postseason. But I think if the Mets add a late inning big arm, it really does improve their chances more than I think the analytic people would say, where it's like, well, you went from a 14% chance to a 16% chance of winning a championship. And I'm like, I know what the analytics say, but like, the other teams have to play against you, and they're going to sit there and go, holy crap, how are we going to score late in the game against these guys? Especially, like, there's been some signs recently. Reed Garrett has kind of gotten it back together. And I mean, he was as dynamic a reliever for the first 6 weeks of the season as there was. You want to add Reed Garrett to that. Brooks Raley, again, it's only 3 or 4 outings, but man, it's been good. Now you add Soto. You shorten the game where your starter only has to give you 5 innings in the postseason, and the other team is going to be in a situation like we didn't score enough today against Manaea to win this game. I feel like the Mets should go for it. I feel like if they could get, and by the way, Helsley falls into that also.
Yeah, of course.
But the only problem with Helsley is you don't have him for next year.
Right.
I'm talking about guys who protect you in case Diaz leaves also, but I wouldn't ignore 2025. The Mets are good enough to win in 2025.
And that's the thing. And, they will be thinking ahead for next year because we know David Stearns. He's always balancing now and later.
And it's what he was hired for, Dexter.
Right. And you're right.
He was hired to turn the Mets into a long-term serial superpower by Steve Cohen. That's the job. But I would not ignore today
I'm
I would not ignore today. Not when
I'm
I
with
haven't
you.
won a World Series since '86. Not when I haven't won a division in 10 years. Not when I'm trying to like reclaim like my whole fan base and that this is a new day and the Wilpons ding dong, those witches are dead. We're moving on. I just would, there's a chance right now for the Mets to win, not just be cute about winning. And I'd find a way to one of those relief pitchers, dominant late inning guys.
I like that that's the focus you have in getting a dominant late inning guy, Joel. But with all that being said about what Stearns was brought here to do, how do you really see him approaching this deadline? Is he going to be aggressive? Is he going to be conservative based on where the Mets are in this current NL East race? How do you see him approaching? Because you're right, this is the job he came here to do. But how is he going to approach this deadline? What does your gut tell you?
So I think he's going to add a relief pitcher of some stature.
Okay.
But that relief pitcher might be another Phil Maton type. And what David Stearns would likely tell you, I don't know if he'll say it publicly, but might tell you privately, is relief pitching is really volatile. It doesn't play a ton of innings. And the guy I'm acquiring is likely to play 20 to 25 innings for me. And the difference between Phil Maton, say, and even Helsley, their teammates right now on the Cardinals, is like Maton could potentially outpitch him for 6-7 weeks for 25 innings. And I don't want to give up a good prospect for something that's not 200 plate appearances where I know a good hitter is probably going to show over the 200, or a good starter over 8 to 10 more starts will show it. When it comes to bullpen, like we saw Devin Williams begin this year with like 15 horrible innings. Like if you trade for a certain guy and he gives you his 15 horrible innings right now, it's devastating. And you might trade for someone really good who's about to do that. And I think that's what keeps David Stearns from doing it. And I get it. I understand the logic of it. I understand what it looks like on a piece of graph paper. And maybe if I was sitting in David Stearns' seat, I'd be more conservative. But just as somebody who is seeing what the opportunity is for the Mets, and the fact that so when somebody said something interesting to me today, and again, I've been on the phone and everything for so many people for so many days here, but somebody said, it was a small market executive. He said, when we trade the prospect, we're expecting that prospect must play for us because it's an $800,000 player. When Steve Cohen trades the prospect, he can say to David Stearns, trade the prospect because if it's a pitcher, we'll just go buy a major league pitcher to cover the time until the prospect who's at single A now gets closer. Or we'll buy the right fielder, or we'll buy the second baseman, or the whatever. So go get the guy today because our checkbook could cover us in the major leagues to grow other prospects. Whereas the Milwaukees, the Tampas, the Clevelands, the Kansas Cities, they can't be as willy-nilly because they must have that player perform in the major leagues for them to be able to afford Bobby Witt or whatever else they're doing. And so I thought it was an interesting point where the guy was saying, he was agreeing with me, the person I talked to today, go be aggressive because Steve Cohen could paper over in the major league the loss of prospects.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Last thing for me here, Joel. When we look back at this deadline, and very close in August, what would you define as a successful trade deadline for the Mets? What boxes need to be checked for you? Is it just adding another high-end reliever, or are there other boxes you think that needs to be checked here for us to look back and say, okay, this 2025 deadline for the New York Mets was a successful one?
So it's the right question. I'm not surprised, Dexter. It's a great question.
Thank you.
And I think it's very difficult to answer because there's what would be best and what's realistic. Like, I think the Mets need a center fielder. I always tell people the problem is there's no center field store on 53rd and Madison to just go buy a center fielder. It's what's realistic and in the marketplace. And there's not a heck of a lot of difference makers out there. Like, would Arizona trade Alec Thomas, who I still think has some ceiling? Yeah, but like, does that change the Mets 2025 fate a lot? It's a young left-hand hitting center fielder who hasn't really hit in the major leagues, who's shown flashes of very good defense. Should the Mets go ahead and get a guy like that and hope like, hey, it's going to come to us. We're going to say hit eighth, play the hell out of center field, and suddenly we'll get a big rise out of offense. Will a pennant race galvanize Cedric Mullins with the lore of, hey, free agency, if I have a big 6-7 weeks here and then a big October, I could completely change the dollar figure I get in the offseason, and maybe that strikes him, or maybe it goes the other way and he plays like badly. I went to a big market, played like crap, everything was on the line and I was bad. So I think they must get another bullpen arm. If it's like, a Peter Fairbanks, Phil Maton type, fine. But I would shoot higher. It would be great if they could get a center fielder. And if Joe Ryan is really getting traded in the next few days, the Mets should be standing there going, yeah, sure. What are the prospects you need? Because Joe Ryan starts one of the first 3 playoff games, and when he's right, he's a dominant guy. And he has 2 more years of control beyond this. So I would be front and center there listening. But to me, they cannot, if they got Soto and a really good righty relief pitcher who pitches in the last 6 outs of the game, that's baseline. But it's a must baseline for a team that could win. If they see a center fielder that I don't see and are able to land them, and that guy performs well for him, it's a real difference maker as well. Dexter, it's just hard to, within the universe of what's possible.
Right.
I would roll the dice on Mullins, because to me, Mullins' floor the rest of the way is still, say, left-hand hitting average major leaguer. And that would have a benefit for the Mets. And he's also a guy, though, who could pop a homer, steal a base, and maybe have 6 great weeks. And you could say, wow, that really worked for us.
Yeah, it shouldn't cost you a lot either, right? That's the other
right.
thing.
He's not having a very good year. It's his walk year. The thing to remember is the fans in Baltimore, he's a homegrown guy.
Yep.
And the fans are not looking at him like a distressed asset. They're like, that's all you got for our guy? So the Orioles, I'm sure, are trying very hard to drum up. Again, the Houston Astros badly need lefty hitting. So if you told me they ended up with Brandon Lau or Cedric Mullins or, Ryan O'Hearn or someone like that, I'd go, of course. So if they ended up with 2 of them, I wouldn't be surprised. Though they have a thin farm system because of everything they've done the last few years, and also losing draft picks from the sign stealing, right? There was a ramification for that. But Dexter, I think the Mets have to walk away with Soto and a guy who pitches in the last 6 outs of the game. If it worked perfect, it would be a guy who could close this year, but certainly could close next year if Diaz walked away. But I would not be hung up on 2026. The Mets are good enough to win, and that doesn't mean selling everybody, but it means selling a little more than comfort level. It's not David Stearns' kind of Milwaukee instinct to say, damn the torpedoes. I'm not saying damn all other torpedoes.
Right.
I would open up a couple of tubes and fire.
I would. And this is in Milwaukee, as you know. Yeah. This is New York. And I like your baseline. We will see what the Mets do by Thursday. You're going to have a very busy week. I'm sure I'll be talking to you some more. Thursday after deadline, I'll definitely be talking to you. But that is everybody, folks. Joel Sherman. Check him out with New York Post, our great baseball columnist. Joel, first time you joined me on Straight Outta Flushing. I appreciate it. We love the Brooklyn Dodgers hat, and we'll have you back again. Thank you, sir.
All the best, Dexter.
All right, it's trade deadline week. That means it's time to put on the general manager hat. So joining me for another dugout discussion today is one of the most passionate Mets fans in the game. He's a co-host of the Till the Mets Do Us Part podcast. Matt Ibanez joins me now, and today we're going to dive into the big question around the trade deadline. What should the Mets do at the deadline? And what we're going to do, folks, is we're going to talk for a little bit, but then we're going to present our best mock trade proposals to upgrade this roster for the stretch run. We're going to look at this from star pitchers to center field help, and we're going to discuss which moves actually make sense for David Stearns to pull off. So Matt and I are going to try to be GMs. This should be kind of fun. We'll see how we do. Matt, how are you doing? Pleasure to see you. Welcome to the show. How's it going?
I'm doing well, Dexter. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been trying, obviously, to try to get me on here, but I'm glad that I finally was able to get the schedule in line so we could do this. I'm pumped up because every fan loves putting on that GM hat and kicking back and making some trades. So let's do it. Let's have some fun.
Yeah, no, it's good. And for folks who don't know, Matt and I have been talking for weeks. We were like trying to get this done. Was trying to get Matt on the show, but we both had, I guess we'll say, family duties, parental duties, different things and obligations to do, so it just didn't work. But you know what? Timing is everything. Matt, you were here. We get to talk about some trades and things of that nature. But before we get into our trade ideas, I wanted to hear what your wish list was. So if you could add one dream target to this Mets roster, who would it be and why?
Honestly, when it comes to talks like this, I always stay within the realm of reality. So I keep it based off of the things that are in front of us at the moment. And I've been saying for a while on our show that, the bullpen needs help, and it does. And because I question some of the bats that could be available and whatnot, my target, and I talked about it on the show this past week, was Griffin Jacks, the relief pitcher, setup man for Minnesota. I just think he is the perfect pitcher to have for this bullpen. He's 30 years old, 2 years of control. He's a control pitcher, but at the same time, he has a 36% strikeout rate to a less than 5% walk rate. He's got a 4-pitch arsenal. The guy's got wipeout stuff. It just makes too much sense. Now, is it going to cost a pretty penny because of age and contract and things of that nature? And because the Twins don't have to deal him? Yes, it would. But you just asked for a dream target, and that's the guy that I think makes all the sense in the world for this team.
So I think it's a good dream target, and I just had on before you Joel Sherman, and he mentioned Jackson, felt like he was the kind of pitcher that the Mets should try to get to have towards the back end of the bullpen, somebody can help set up in terms for Edwin Diaz. He felt like that's something that the Mets could do. And I assume that you're sort of on the same vibe as Joel here because you're looking at a way, how do the Mets sort of shorten the game here, especially once they get down the stretch to the postseason. That's why you feel like Jacks would be really valuable, correct?
Absolutely. And because, like I said before, as much as I would love for this team to add offense, I really think that shortening up the game, protecting the starters that we do have makes too much sense because building that bridge to Edwin Diaz is something that this team has been talking about now for, I feel like, the last couple of years, and it's always been kind of shaky. So being able to get to Diaz, but if you're going to add someone like Jacks who can make it that much more dynamic on the back end, I think it's perfect. I really do.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good fit. I think Mets fans will be happy from that. I guess one other question I have before we get into making our deals, if the Mets walk away from the deadline with only one upgrade, we know they already got Gregory Soto, what position or role do you think they have to address no matter what? Is it bullpen for you, or is it adding another bat, to maybe possibly at center field, another position? Is it the bullpen for you? What's that one position or role that they absolutely have to address?
I have been saying for the longest time how much I believe the back end of this lineup needs another bat. I really do. I love that the kids are showing out tonight and they're doing well, but I still think that they need a bat. But the problem is I don't know if that bat exists. I just alluded to it before. So that's why if I can only choose one thing, I'm going with what I think is more of a sure option, even though bullpens and bullpen arms, relief pitchers are very volatile. I still think that my one thing that I would choose is to continue upgrading this bullpen to try and shorten the game.
I think if you can shorten the game, I also would love to see this team add a bat. Kind of with you, though. I don't know where it's coming from or who's the bat worth them going to get, right? Because it all comes down to cost. And Joel and I were talking about this, too. What's the cost going to be to get these guys? However, when we like to play mock GM, and for all of us out there, some of us will think about the cost. Some of us will not at all whatsoever. So just for the people watching or listening, what Matt and I did is we came up with 3 mock trades. And we put some work into this because I reached out to Matt. Matt was still working on it. I was putting some thought into this over the last couple of days. Matt, since you were the guest here, I'm going to, we have 3 each. I will have you give yours first, the first one that you have, and then we'll alternate. So I'll have you go first. What's your first mock trade that you have for the people?
Well, I'm going to stick with what I've been talking about, and that was the bullpen. So David Bednar over in Pittsburgh has been lights out, for the last handful of weeks now. He hasn't given up a run. The strikeouts are there. Getting talent out of Pittsburgh would be great for not only the Mets, but probably great for the talent as well because, Pittsburgh is Pittsburgh. But at the same time, David Bednar coming to the Mets in exchange for two prospects. I have it at Nick Morabito and Nate Dome. Now, for those that don't know, I mean, Morabito's been going up the prospect ranks for the last couple of years. I was having a good year this year. And the reasoning behind my choices here really comes down to Pittsburgh wanting to obtain offense and they need outfield help as well. So I figured Morabito is the fit and replacing with another arm. I don't know what they're going to do with Mitch Keller. If they deal him, they might be needing another arm. Granted, Pittsburgh does have its fair share of young talent, but you can never have enough young pitching. So that's my reasoning as to why I think Morabito and Dome could be the guys that end up going back to Pittsburgh with the Mets obtaining David Bednar.
Okay, I like that. I feel like you're not giving up too much there. Feels like it's fair. You got to think about if the Pirates would.
I try.
You try to be fair. You did. Would you? Is there a way you think the Mets could get Bednar with already established major league player and not have to give up prospects? Do you think there's any way they could do that if they gave up, say, let's say Pittsburgh maybe wanted a Vientos or somebody? Do you think that's a possibility?
I do think, and I do have a note here saying that a bolder take would be straight up asking, are you a fan of Mark Vientos? Do you think it could work for you? And I think it can, and I think I would do it. Question is, would Pittsburgh do it? And I think that they would, mainly because they're so desperate for offense, but really they're desperate for cheap offense. And granted, Vientos has been struggling this year. We know the sophomore slump, but that's something that I think Pittsburgh would be willing to take a chance on because he had shown that he can do this at the major league level. They might say, hey, let's get him in here. Let's work with him. Let's try to build up this offense because it's something that we're lacking. And because they don't want to spend money, they want to say, we got a shot here with a guy that could be a 30 home run hitter on the cheap. So that's something that I would be willing to do because ultimately there's going to be a logjam here. And we're seeing it already. Somebody is going to go. The question is, who's it going to be?
That's another question for me, and I talked a little bit about this with Joel, right, is I wonder if one of the guys in the logjam you're talking about with Vientos, with Brett Beatty, with Ronnie Mauricio, and you could even add Luis Angel Acuna in that too already. You wonder if one of those guys is moved in the deal this week. You wonder if one of those guys are not here for the long haul past Thursday. That's going to be interesting to see. But I think whether you believe in Vientos and what he did last season, Matt, I think if you could upgrade the bullpen to that level, I'd be willing to move on. Now, if you do that, that then also makes you say, well, okay, how are you replacing this bat, right? Because now you got to still try to find another bat, and that would be part of something we talked about where it's like there's not that many good bats out there, but maybe there's another deal you could do. Okay, so my first mock trade that I have here, I also looked at the Pirates. And this is a name that's been rumored about a bunch with the Mets, and that's Mitch Keller. So the Mets getting Mitch Keller from the Pirates, and to the Pirates they would send catching prospect Kevin Parada and Dominic Hamill, right-handed pitcher, for them. Mets get Mitch Keller. I know, look, here's the thing with this, and you tell me what you think. I tried to be as fair as I could with the prospects, okay? So, look, you talked about the fact that they're desperate for offense, and we know the get down from Pittsburgh. You are 100% right, Matt. They want some cheap offense, right? Because they're not trying to spend a lot of money. Parada's a guy who is trending close to Major League ready. Maybe you can play him for 2026, because that's another thing. It's not just about getting cheap offense. It's guys that can come and play right away. They know this year is a wrap for them. It's not going to happen. But is Parada a guy that could contribute to them next year? Yeah, sure. Possible for them. And then they also get a young right arm that they could bring up through the organization. So you're helping them on two fronts, and you're getting a quality starter who you could put in at the front of the rotation, down the stretch, in a playoff game, which is something this team needs. I still think they could use another arm in the starting rotation because, who knows, Clay Holmes, his innings are starting to get up there. Do you want to move him back to the pen? Well, if you get a guy like Mitch Keller, now you've got some flexibility to be able to do so. So it's a move I'd like. I will acknowledge this about my trade. The Pirates could want more. It's possible, right? The Pirates could want more. And I think if you're the Mets, maybe you think about throwing another prospect in there. But I think this is at least a pretty good framework of a deal to try to get Mitch Keller. What do you say?
I would say that I agree with you 100%, and it's something that I've been, banging the drum as well. That adding some floor to this rotation would be a good thing because it's a guy that can go out there, provide, be somebody that, though it's not like the big time ace name, he's still somebody that can go out there and help. And I think that ultimately, when it comes to your deal, I think that the biggest drawback for me hearing it, but most likely the Pirates, is that it's the years. The fact that you'd be able to get Keller for, I think it's what, 3 more years on
Yep.
a very cheap deal, at least in this market, cheap on the yearly. He's not a world beater. He's not going to be, like I say, he's not an ace, but I still think because of the years and the control, they would push for more talent and most likely more of the top. They'd probably shoot for like the 8 to 12 range of the Mets system, I think, at least, for someone like Mitch. Now, would I be willing to do that? I still would, because I like Mitch Keller. I think he fits. I do. But because of the recent reports of them having hesitancy now, because let's be honest, Pittsburgh shouldn't deal him because that is cheap for pitching. But the fact that Pittsburgh wants to cut payroll when they only have an $88 million payroll, that in itself speaks volumes about Pittsburgh. But I'm all about Keller. Would love to have him. Might cost a little bit more than that, though.
Yeah, I wonder, and I thought about this. I think you're right. And look, I was being a little cheap and trying to hold back on the deal there. I can admit that. But I wonder if they asked for a Luis Angel Acuna. I wonder if you. I think you got to do it.
Mm-hmm.
If they ask for Ronnie Mauricio, do you want to do that? Would they want? Do you think they'd want another higher end pitcher? Is that what you're looking for in that 8 to 12 range? Are you thinking about one of the top pitching prospects? Those are the questions. And not to cut you off, Matt, but it's price is what we're talking about here.
Yeah. I don't think they'd be asking for the pitching because like I said, they have 3 guys already in the chamber ready to go when it comes to promoting. I think they want offense, but I had mentioned during our live show, I said, would I be willing to trade at the time? This was a couple of weeks ago now. I said, would I be willing to trade Ronnie Mauricio for Mitch Keller? And I had said, yes, I would. And the chat did not, they did not like that.
Okay.
They were not feeling me on that. Like everyone was very much against me on that one. But I said, look, guys, at the time I said, you have to have some coverage when it comes to these arms, whether it's because of injuries, whether it's because of innings. I was just thinking you got to have guys, you have to have fresh arms ready to go come October, because we all know you got to have the pitching when it comes to October. You have to have it.
I agree with you 100%. And I'm also, look, you can't keep, I think people dream of keeping all these prospects. You're not going to be able to. I also understand that people are afraid that every prospect they trade away is going to be Pete Crow Armstrong. That's also not going to always happen, right? Like, I understand that as well, too. But, yeah, you got to give something to get something. If Ronnie Mauricio had to be included in the deal to get Mitch Keller with the control that you mentioned, and is a fantastic point of the 3 years that they have, yeah, I'd do it. I'd do it in a heartbeat, and I wouldn't even think about it. All right, what do you have for me next? What's your second deal here, Matt?
Let's see. Trade number 2 obviously goes to what we were just speaking on before, and that was Griffin Jacks. And we just saw the highlights of him before as well. Griffin Jacks coming to the Mets. Now, this one's going to cost you because of the years that he has and the talent that he is. And again, it's convincing Minnesota that you can deal this guy because we're giving you this talent. So I went higher up. I still didn't touch the pitchers. I still didn't touch Carson Bench, but I'm still giving up some guys that are having some strong years and are on the come up, not only within our system, the Mets system, but Baseball America and all the press releases when it comes to prospects in general. And that is Jesus Baez, third baseman / shortstop, and AJ Ewing, who's having a breakout year. He's got an over 800. I think he's got an 865 OPS. He has 55 steals on the year. Not a big homer, not a big home run threat. He's only got 3, but still. Like I said, I think he's got a 315 average. He's the prize in this one. I'm looking at the twin system. They could use some more help around the infield. Ewing can, work both infield and outfield, second base, outfield. So I think that those two, which are ranked pretty highly within this system, but again, once things rearrange and they purpose where everyone is, I think that those two names are going to be much higher than they are at the moment. And I think that interested teams in this team's farm system, I should say, those names are definitely ones that are going to be very high. It's going to hurt Mets fans, especially prospect huggers. They're not going to want to see those guys go. But if you want Jacks, you have to pay up. And those are the two that I'm willing to give up.
Yeah, I think it comes down to how much you value what it seems like you and I are in alignment on in valuing, and that's shortening the game. Or I will also add how much you value going for it this year, right? And I think that, I'll say this for myself. I think the Mets have to go for it this year. You got a chance to win. You have a good % chance to win. You're one of the better teams in baseball. The Dodgers.
NL's open too.
Yeah, that's what
NL's open.
In a way, Matt, that maybe some people didn't think with the Dodgers, right?
Yeah,
the
Dodgers, they're going to run away with it.
Yeah, and the Dodgers have not run away with it. And they've looked a little vulnerable. And there's a chance. And all you got to do is, I'm going to say all you have to do, I'm not trying to trivialize it, but you have to get in. You and I were talking about this before we started recording. You have to play your best baseball at the right time. And so pitching. I'm with that and shorten the game. What I like about your trade is you were looking to try to get guys that another team could get, and they might not be as high in terms of the pecking order, in terms of prospects within the organization, but they'll have great value down the road. You're looking at what other teams will project and see in these guys and say, okay, this is how we can go and get Jacks, because they're going to get guys that are probably going to move up through the system quickly, which is what these other teams want and Minnesota would want. I see what you're doing there. You're giving good value, but it doesn't also take away from your top-end guys that you have at the top of your prospect list. So you got to give something to get something. That's what we're doing here. You got to give something to get something. I like the deal. Listen, if the Mets came out of this week and they got Jacks and they had Soto, Gregory Soto, that is.
I'm ecstatic.
You're pumped,
I'm
right?
ecstatic. Yeah, big time.
Yeah. I feel like you got to be pumped about that. It would be, I would say, mission accomplished, at least in terms of the bullpen. Now, let me ask you this, though. If that's all they end up doing, are you pumped? Or is that enough? Are you just pumped? Or you feel like, Stearns got to do a little more?
Like, in terms of the bullpen, I would be fine. I'd be ecstatic for that. But because I would love another bat, but like I said, it's hard to be upset because as I'm looking at it, I don't know who that bat is. Now, you're hearing things about guys that might become available. What, are they going to move people? Are they going to move some of these kids? Like, there's a logjam in some places. I'm not sure where this bat comes from. So if they come out of this and they go, look, we tried to get X player, we tried to get Y player, and it didn't work out. They weren't willing, or they were like, it's hard for me to be upset if they say we're just getting the bullpen, because from all reports to this point, it seems as though no matter what, they can talk about center field all they want, but no matter what, every single person keeps on saying bullpen. So if they come out of this with just the bullpen, I can't say that I was lied to, because everything that Stearns has said to this point, he's never really lied to us either. And everything from all the other reports, Will Salmon, Joel Sherman, like everyone, it's always bullpen. So if that's all they do, I can't say I was blindsided, because I was told the entire time.
Yeah, and even talking to Mike Puma the other day, I'll be a reporter here at the Post. He was talking about, bullpen is going to be a major focus. He expected them to focus that on heavily over. This was after they got Soto, and I talked to him. He said this was going to be the focus. Now, would I like to see the Mets get a bat, Matt? Sure, I would. Sure. And that leads me to my next trade, because I said, okay, who's a bat I think they can get that won't tax the farm system and they could reasonably get? So I came around, and obviously center field is the position that the Mets could use the most upgrade, because if we're keeping it real, Tyrone Taylor and Jeff McNeil, not going to get it done. Right? We're not. Yeah. Like both the guys, Tyrone Taylor is tremendous defensively, but the offense leaves a lot to be desired. Jeff McNeil, he's not a center fielder by trade, and you worry a little bit about his health as well too. So I look to Baltimore. Cedric Mullins.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not coming back with the Orioles. We know that. We understand all that. So sending to the Orioles, I looked at Nick Morabito, who's a guy you had earlier in your first deal, and then Franklin Gomez, the righty, and Cedric Mullins, getting Cedric Mullins back here to the Mets. Now look, Mullins has not had a great year offensively, but a couple of years ago, and he's got playoff experience when the Orioles were in the playoffs, hit well, can play good defense. His metrics have been down a little bit defensively, but can give you some solid defense. And he's a lefty bat, which is helpful for this lineup right now. So I like Mullins and what he can do if he can hit. Here's the reason I also like him too, and where I think you can give up some mid-level prospects for him, is because you understand that he's a rental. You're only getting him for the last, 60 games or so. And you're hoping that he can be motivated. I'm gonna bet on that. Now, we know this a lot, Matt. That doesn't always work out great. Some guys come in and they give you Yoenis Cespedes type production down the stretch. I'm not saying that Mullins will be Cespedes, but I do think he can help this Mets lineup be a little bit more professional towards the bottom lineup, which is something they need, right? And he might be motivated to say, hey, I'm in the final year. This is a contract year. I'm looking to secure a new deal starting next year. If I play well down the stretch, Joel Sherman said the same thing to me earlier, if I play well down the stretch with this team and I play well in the playoffs, that could help earn me some money. I always like motivated players. I always like that. And so for a guy like him, coming from Baltimore, change his scenery, coming to this Mets team, hoping that he could spark them, it could go well. Now, I'll also be real to all the fans out there. We've also seen this go wrong. We've seen this times where guys come, you think they'd be motivated, and then the pressure's too much, or they can't play in New York. So I understand that all that is real. However, I will caution and say this is not Daniel Vogelback a couple years ago. This is not Darren Ruff. This is a guy I think that can come in, play a good center field, can insert himself right into his lineup, and is an upgrade offensively. Now, again, hasn't hit that well this season. All the numbers are down. Batting average is down. OPS is down. All of that. But I do think he's the kind of guy you can slide in for some mid-tier prospects, and it wouldn't hurt the Mets that much. What do you say on Mullins? I don't think he's a sexy bat that you bring in here, but I think he could get the job done.
I don't mind Mullins. He started off the season really hot. It's just that it really started to deteriorate. It's gone down. I know he was hurt for a little bit as well, and it hasn't clicked again for him. He's a solid ball player, and I agree with you when you say just adding some professionalism to the back end, can play a good center field. You wouldn't have to worry about so much about platooning. You'd be able to move Jeff back to second. You can work, Ronnie and Brett at third, or however you want to do things. And then mix in the DH with Marte and stuff like that. So there are ways and different machinations where this can actually work well. So I don't think it's a bad deal at all. I wouldn't be upset if the Mets got him. I honestly think that they might even be able to get him for less than what even your offer was, mainly because I think that Baltimore, especially with how he's been playing, I don't think Baltimore is going to be asking for the world or expecting the world when it comes to him, because there are other names, granted few and far, but there are a couple of names that have people's eye a little bit more so than Mullins. I wouldn't be shocked if Baltimore just tried to jump the market and just say, give us something so we can get ahead of this before people decide, oh, so-and-so got paid this much for, like, Luis Robert as an example. Maybe we're not going to be able to get what we wanted because he only went for so much and he's viewed as a higher end ceiling player than Mullins, so we're going to have to get even less. They might try to jump in that sense. But if they got him, I'm for it. And like I said, I wouldn't be shocked if they got him for actually less than what you've been put out there.
Yeah, what's interesting about the fact that you said about them possibly getting him for less, I think what I find interesting is the timing of it all could matter a lot. You're right. And if they're hearing from other teams that Luis Robert Jr. gets it, or Duran in Boston is on the market, right, you expect him to get a lot more, and we'd be interested to see if the Red Sox move him at all. That could be very interesting too, because you're right, Baltimore may want to get out in front of this and say, all right, let's try to get what we can get now before we're, caught late on Thursday where we're scrambling to try to find value, and then everybody knows you're not going to get that much. You want to trade from a position of strength. So that's a good point. That's an interesting one. All right, so we're here on Cedric Mullins. Don't think he'll be a bad fit. Might not cost as much as I've put out there. All right, what do you have for your last trade? What you got?
Last one is one that's obviously been talked about a lot today, and that is Luis Robert Jr. It's been talked about really the last couple of days, and it's one that I'm very iffy on, but I wanted to put a bat one in there and not just go all arms. So I have it where the Mets receive Luis Robert, and they give up, and this might be upsetting to some people because of how he's been hitting lately. They give up Drew Gilbert, who's been tearing the cover off the ball lately, as well as Blade Tidwell. Now, look, I think that Chicago would be willing to take back someone like Tidwell, upside arm, and be able to integrate him. He's cheap and things of that nature. They have a young budding team in their eyes, and adding another arm would be something that they would like. And I think someone of Tidwell's level could be something that that interests them. But when it comes to Gilbert, obviously, getting another outfielder back by getting rid of what they thought would be a future with Robert, they thought he was going to be the future of the franchise, didn't really work out. I don't think that this is a improper spot for the Mets to deal Gilbert. And even though some fans might hear this and say, well, the he's doing 10 times better than what Robert's been doing. He's a little bit banged up, that being Robert at the moment. So why wouldn't we just call up Gilbert? And I think, and why I'm putting him in this deal is because if the Mets, more so David Stearns, thought that Drew Gilbert was the answer in center field, I don't think we would be hearing rumors about the Mets trying to attain a center fielder. And I think that speaks volumes, and it's always follow the tea leaves and follow the hints and clues that are dropped here and there. So I think that something like this could make sense. I know that there was a report that said that the White Sox would want probably 2 prospects that could fall between the Mets 10 through 20. And I think that both of these players fit that bill. And it's something that I think I'd be willing to do. And I preface it also by saying I am not the biggest Luis Robert fan, but I am willing to bet on the ceiling of this player in hopes that getting out of Chicago into a stronger locker room, into a playoff atmosphere, I'm hoping that reignites him and allows his talent to play bigger than what it has over the last 2 years. So I'd be willing to take that risk if that was the asking price.
Yeah, don't think it's a bad risk. Think it's a guy who's extremely talented. As far as the Drew Gilbert of it all, and I had asked Joel Sherman before you came on about this, and he made a good point. Sometimes you could bring up a guy like him, because I think it's a lot to ask of a guy to come up in a pennant race. Everybody's not going to do what Michael Conforto did in 2015. Everybody's not built like that or able to do that. Sometimes it works out for you. Drew Gilbert's hitting well now. Do you think the fact that his name's out there, the Mets are looking for a center fielder, you and I were texting earlier about the rumors about this that were starting to come out? I do find that interesting. Like you, I'm like, read the tea leaves. Think about why that's out there. Obviously, I also like to call trade season that. I like to call it lying season because everybody's out here selling information and misinformation and putting this out there. And you don't know where the wind is blowing. But what I do like about your trade is I don't know. Blade Tidwell is what he is. It really comes down to how you value Drew Gilbert. I don't know. I'd be lying if I said I knew what his value was or what he's going to be as a major league player if he makes it there. I have no idea. I don't think this is not a situation where I think you're giving up a Brandon Sproat or Jonah Tong, obviously who the Mets are very, very high on. You get a guy like Robert, you're kind of banking on, like what you said, a change of scenery here. Can that help him? I think, is it possible? Sure. Could it also, this is kind of like Mullins. Could it also not?
Yeah.
Sure. I don't know. I think some fans, you're right. You said you brought it up too on the live show and your live show, and some fans are going to be mad about that because they're going to think you gave up too much. You got to give up something to get something.
You have to.
And you don't, I would put it like this. Maybe the Mets don't get a bat, not an arm. They don't get a bat here at the trade deadline. Maybe that happens, Matt. But if there are chances for them to get in the conversation, I think they got to get in the conversation. You got to at least talk and see what the price is going to be. Luis Robert Jr., I would agree. I think talent-wise, higher, upgrade over Mullins. I would say. His potential with his bat is higher than Mullins. So it's probably going to cost you a little bit more. I'm not mad at your trade. I think it's all right. I think it's fine.
I think that it's something where you got to look at it and go, also, like I don't like dealing away Mets outfielders because I like the fact that they're trying to build up the outfield because I feel as though for the longest time they haven't had depth, down low, to call guys up. God forbid something happens to the guys up top here. So I'm not a big fan of giving away outfielders, but you're getting one back here, and it's also one that was attained in a deal before David Stearns was here, and we've had a handful of outfielders already jump him in terms of the rankings and overall play, and that being because of health and things of that nature. But Carson Bench has jumped him, like I just mentioned before, AJ Ewing. So there are guys within this system that are ranked higher than he, who have showed out better than he. And granted, he's doing great right now, but that could also just be a showcase for his next team as well.
Yeah, that could be. And maybe the Mets are looking at like, hey, we could sell high on him right now. So that might not be a bad move. Okay, here's my last deal. So you went with a bat. And I said, okay, I'm going to aim, I would say, a little bit high. I know for this player that I'm about to mention, the asking price is probably going to be high. I also will preface this by saying I know that there is some risk around this player. And that's Sandy Alcantara from the Marlins. All right?
Okay.
Here's my thinking behind this. We talked about pitching. You and I agree on this. The Mets also can use, I still think there's value in having a top front-end starter, an ace. Alcantara, I know it was a couple years ago, has got ace stuff. He has not looked good thus far to start the season, though his last start was really good. His ERA is over 6. Understand that. However, if you trust what the Mets have been doing with their pitching lab, can they get him right? Now, Matt, everybody thinks they can make everybody right. This is why people make trades, right?
Exactly.
We're gonna have a change of scenery. We'll get this guy.
I can fix him.
Yeah, I can fix him. We'll get him we'll get him in the system. He'll be good, right?
Yeah.
You'll get all that. Could the Mets fix him? I'll trust what the Mets have done with pitchers. We've seen them do some good work lately, right?
For sure.
So here's my deal. Christian Scott. Know he's coming off. Know he's coming off the Tommy John surgery. Still rehabbing off of that. Luis Angel Acuna. And Nolan McLean. Steep price.
Woo!
It's very steep, yeah.
That's steep.
It is steep. But you're getting a guy who's shown it could be a top-end pitcher, Cy Young Award winner, has 3 years of team control, which is very attractive. So you're going to have to give up a lot here. Giving them 2 pitching prospects, giving them a young infielder that they can work with, it's a lot. But if you have him who can start a game 1 or game 2 of a series for you, right? You have him with Kodai Senga, you have him with Sean Manaea, and you've seen what he's been able to do, and he's got good stuff. And maybe he needs a change of scenery. Maybe he needs to get out of Miami and get to New York and be rejuvenated here in a pennant race. I'm banking on his talent. We've seen guys take a little while when they come back from Tommy John surgery. I think it's taken him a bit of a while. I think he can readjust once he gets here, and I'm trusting what the Mets can do to right the ship. So I think you would like Alcantara on the team if he's right. I think you would, and a lot of other Mets fans would. But do you think my price is a little bit too high here? The Marlins are going to ask for a lot, though. I don't think this is going to be cheap, as they should.
Yeah.
So what do you think of this deal?
It's one that, like, it punched me in the face. I won't lie. Like,
I didn't mean to punch you in the face, man. I did not mean to do that. Sorry.
That one caught me. But no, I understand where you're coming from because of the years of control and what he has done. Now, it comes down to also, for a lot of people, it's like, well, what have you done for me lately? Which is why it's so hard to to assess someone like Luis Roberts' market, because they're going to say, well, the last 2 years, the guy hasn't been that great. He had the one good year. He's been downhill since. How could you keep on asking for so much? Now, one could say, well, Sandy here, he's won a Cy Young. He's coming off of the injury, but, he's trending in the right direction in certain spots. And it's like, I get it. I do. I will say this. If that offer was made to the Marlins right now, I think that they wouldn't hesitate and they would say yes, because that's how highly I think of, at least, and a lot of people within the community think of Nolan McLean. So I think that is something that they would do because of the years of control that they would get on Nolan and the overall talent that he has shown to this point, while also getting a bat and another arm as well. So it would make all the sense in the world for the Marlins to do that. Would the Mets do it? If this was a Sandy that was showing out a lot more than what he has to this point, last start notwithstanding, if he was showing out more, then I think that this would be something they could potentially entertain. But because McLean is in it, I don't know if they would be willing to pay that price. Now, if they asked for a lesser arm, or if they asked for, like we mentioned, the bats before, that being Vientos or even a Ronnie, like, is that something that could be entertained a little bit more? Potentially. It's just so hard. And that's why when you pick someone like Sandy, like what I said before with Robert, it's so hard, because assessing this talent and figuring out what the cost really is and if it's worth it is so difficult, because you're like, I see the glimpse. I've seen this player at the top. And every Mets fan would say to you, hey, if Nolan McLean could get the 90th percentile and top out like Cy Young Sandy, like yeah, that'd be fantastic. But now you're like, well, now you can have Sandy. But like, is that still the same Sandy though? Like, I don't know. Like, I want him to be. I trust this whole process in the lab, and I love what they're doing, and I want to think that it could happen. But this is one where I will be that Met fan and just be like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to trade it. I don't know if I want to trade it. I don't know if I want to trade it.
Listen, this was a tough deal for me to, like, I really sat with this and I was like, because I'll tell people this. I had Mauricio in the deal.
Okay.
And then I said to myself, they're going to want more pitching. You got to give him something. So I pulled him out of it, and I said, going to have to give him I did not want to do it, and it is risky, and you're banking on what you've seen. You're right. Everything you said is right, Matt. You're banking on what you've seen before from Alcantara. Can he get back to that? I think it's a risk worth taking for what you can get out of him for the next couple of years and how you can extend, I'll say extend your window, but increase your window. We know that David Stearns does not like to overpay for pitching.
Right.
So if you can get a top-end starter over the next couple of years, I get it. It's a huge if. I get it. I understand that. But we've seen it from this guy before. I think if you trust your system, trust the process. Look, it's also a risk. Nolan McLean may never be as good as what we saw from Sandy Alcantara in 2022.
True.
He may never be as good as that. I have no idea. You never know with these prospects. I might be willing to take this risk. I think you're right that if this was proposed to the Marlins, they would say yes. I try to look at some of the deals in that way. Would the Marlins say yes on this? You're right, though. Would the Mets want to give up Nolan McLean? No, and I know some Mets fans are going to watch this and they're going to comment. They're going to boo me like they did with you on the last deal. They're going to boo me for that. But you know what? This is why we do this. This is why we put on the GM hats. And they're fun. It's always fun to have these discussions, and we'll see. So last thing I have for you before we get out of here.
Yeah.
I asked this to Joel Sherman, and I'll ask the same to you. When you look back at this, we finish July, we get into August, and what does a successful Mets trade deadline look like to you? If the Mets do blah, 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 X, Y, Z, what makes a successful trade deadline for them here in 2025?
I would say a successful trade deadline would be lefty reliever, which they just got in Soto, righty reliever, enter whatever name you want, specifically one that throws hard, and could be the bridge to Diaz in the 8th inning. So it can push down the likes of Stanek and Reed, and obviously the lefties down the pecking order. You want to say it's Jacks, you want to say it's Bednar, you want to say it's Helsley, like whoever it is, get someone in that spot. And then figuring out whoever that bat is that you think can help this team solidify the back end of this lineup, solidify that 5 through 9, push guys down one spot so it's less on them in terms of production, which obviously allows everyone to relax. That, to me, is how you go about succeeding. Now, if that's, like I said, if that's a DH, if that is a center fielder, whatever it is, however it works out, that's what I think is the ultimate successful trade deadline. But if I don't get the bat, I'm not gonna lose it. I'm not gonna be that upset. But if you really want to get to the tippy top, I would say lefty reliever, check. Righty reliever, hopefully check, and then finding a center fielder.
I like that. I feel like if they did that, that would be a fantastic trade deadline. But it's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun week for myself. It'll be a fun week for you. Maybe stressful for some, but we'll see what the Mets do at the trade deadline. Yeah, you're right. It is always stressful for some. That is Matt Ibanez. Check him out with the Mets. Till Mets Do Us Part podcast, which is a fantastic name, which means you're committed to the Mets. You know, sometimes you want to be committed to your team.
Thank you.
Sometimes you feel like you don't want to be committed to your team. Either way, Matt, this was a pleasure. Thanks for joining me on Straight Outta Flushing. I'm sure we will do this again when our schedules align, and we'll get it. Thank you, man. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me on, Dex. It was a pleasure, and I had a blast.
All right, time for this week's Mets Mention, where baseball meets the internet, and the internet meets, well, a whole lot of vibes. Let's start with Paige McConnell. The legendary Fish keyboardist had himself quite a day last week, throwing out the first pitch at Citi Field, and then hanging out with Keith and Gary in the booth. Paige is a lifelong Mets fan, so you know that had to be a dope moment for him. And Paige didn't stop at the mound. He did his thing at a pair of sold-out shows at Forest Hill Stadium, where Mr. Met and Mrs. Met pulled up looking like they're always ready to party. Seriously, what event are they not at? They're everywhere. But next up, we got John Oliver. He went viral for his analysis on how foreigners picked their New York baseball team. Listen to his conclusion. Pretty interesting.
And came to America in 2006 to start working for The Daily Show. Realized I had to pick the Yankees or the Mets. Realized that is no choice that a human being should ever consider for too long. It would have to be the Mets. You don't get to move to a country and pick the Yankees without being an utter arsehole. So I have been happy with my choice, being a Mets fan. Has it been a fun experience since 2006? Look at the stats. Not overwhelmingly fun, but and my son has just got into baseball this year, right? Massive Mets fan.
Okay.
So the way the Mets started the year, completely an atypical response from most Mets fans. He was having a happy experience. They were winning all of the games. I realized he really loved baseball and really loved the Mets when they were about 5 games into their slump, and this little kid, 6-year-old kid, is looking at the TV and he's saying, "What are they doing?" And I think in that moment he became a Mets fan for life.
Hey, can't say I disagree with John Oliver at all. Look, if you choose the Mets over the Yankees, you definitely earn New York because, let's be real, choosing the Mets is not a flex at all. It's a pledge of loyalty through turmoil like September collapses that some of you guys know well, TARP delays, and Tuesday night losses to the Rockies, and then having to think about Dinger. That's your Mets mention for this week. We had Fish, we had foreigners, and as always, we had Flushing. We'll see y'all in the comments. Look, I like the Gregory Soto deal. The stuff is nasty. He brings the heat from the left side. He's got closing experience. And he gives the Mets another late inning weapon to help protect leads down the stretch. But here's the thing. Adding another Soto does not fix the Mets. If David Stearns is serious about making a run in October, a deep run, he can't be done here because right now, the 2025 Mets, despite their recent winning, they've got a few holes to fill. So let's start with that bullpen. Yes, Gregory Soto helps, but the Mets still need a right-handed arm who can be trusted with traffic on base. Right now, who outside of Diaz and maybe Reed Garrett do you trust with a run-run lead in the 8th? Exactly, you're thinking about it. Names like the Cardinals' Ryan Helsley, the Pirates' David Bednar, or even the Rays' Pete Fairbanks would make sense here. Now, let's talk lineup. The center field situation is, let's call it, in progress. Drew Gilbert might be the guy one day, but if you're trying to win right now, The Mets need a veteran bat who can cover ground and lengthen the lineup. Cedric Mullins? Maybe. Luis Robert Jr.? Sure, I'll take him. Even a platoon guy who can crush righties would absolutely help. And then, oh yes, there's the rotation. Kodai Senga still getting back to form. Montas and Minaya just also returned. They're finding their groove. Clay Holmes, his innings are starting to pile up. David Peterson is holding it down with quality starts, but the team needs more. You cannot go into August without another stable, experienced starter. So, yes, I'm glad David Stearns made the first move. But if you're trying to win this division, if you're trying to make a deep October run, and if you're trying to take this fan base back to the World Series, you don't just Gregory Soto shuffle out of the room. You finish the job because the clock's ticking and the NL isn't waiting. Got some notes for the people. We will be bringing out a lot of content this week as we lead up to the trade deadline. And on Thursday, July 31st, we're going to have a joint Straight Outta Flushing and Pinstripe Post trade deadline show hosted by myself and Ryan Sampson after the deadline is passed. So be sure to tune into that. All right, that's going to do it for another great episode. Special thanks to my producer, Erica Block, associate producer, Nick Federico, editor, Eduardo Guerrero, and production assistant, Tommy Cohen. I'm Dexter Henry. We'll catch you next week after the deadline on Straight Outta Flushing.